It was late December in Manchester, England. The streets were soaked with rain, the kind that didn't fall in heavy sheets but clung like mist, sliding down windows, seeping into clothes, and making the world smell of rust and damp brick. Midnight had already swallowed the city. Most people were asleep, but in one of the forgotten corners, an old Victorian townhouse still stood. It had once been beautiful. Tall windows, iron railings, elegant wooden doors, but decades of abandonment had turned it into something else, a shell of silence and mold. The house was notorious in the neighborhood. Locals whispered about the strange glow sometimes seen behind its cracked curtains, even though no electricity had run through the place for years. Children dared each other to throw stones at its windows, only to run screaming when something inside seemed to move. But tonight, 4 friends, Ethan, Clara, Marcus, and Lily, had chosen it deliberately. They weren't thrill seekers in the usual sense. All 4 were graduate students in computer science at the University of Manchester, obsessed with artificial intelligence and the boundaries between code and consciousness. For weeks, they had been experimenting with an app Ethan had discovered on a hidden forum, one that claimed to use AI to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. It wasn't a simple voice modulator or chatbot. The program was described as a virtual séance engine. It used deep learning trained on billions of recorded voices, video fragments, and biometric data to simulate identities that were no longer alive. Most people would laugh at such an idea, but what drew them in was the claim, buried deep in the forum thread, that the program did not merely mimic the dead. It connected to residual consciousness, data beyond human senses. So, they chose the old house, a place with no distractions, no Wi-Fi signals except what they brought, and plenty of history buried within its walls. When they entered, the air hit them immediately, thick, heavy, and sour. The scent of wet wood, mildew, and rusted iron lingered as though the house had been exhaling for decades. Their flashlights revealed peeling wallpaper, yellowed with age, curling like burnt paper at the edges. Water dripped somewhere deep inside, a steady plip, plip, plip that echoed unnaturally through the halls. The living room where they set up was half collapsed. A grand fireplace sat blackened and cold. Old furniture lay broken, its stuffing spilling like entrails across the warped floorboards. Yet in the center of the room, Ethan placed his laptop on a small camping table they had brought. The glow from the screen cut through the darkness, a sharp rectangle of sterile light that looked alien inside the decayed house. Marcus set up a portable Wi-Fi router. Lily unpacked a small digital recorder, just in case something extra decided to speak. Clara, quieter than the rest, simply ran her fingers across the wallpaper and whispered, almost to herself, "It feels like the walls are listening." Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the shattered windows. The wind pressed through the cracks, making the entire house wheeze. Every so often, a loose shutter slammed against the brick with a violent bang, making them flinch. The only clock in the house was Ethan's wristwatch, and at 12:15 a.m., he pressed a key. The app booted up. A plain black interface with white text filled the screen. Open quote, Virtual Séance Engine v3.7. Establishing connection. Please provide a name. Close quote. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The others gathered close, their faces lit in pale blue, shadows stretching across the damp walls behind them. "What name do we put in?" Marcus asked, his voice sounding too loud in the cavernous silence. Ethan glanced at Clara. She had lost her older brother, Daniel, in a car accident 2 years ago. She rarely spoke of it, but her hand trembled as she tucked her hair behind her ear. "No," Clara said firmly, anticipating his thought. "We're not using someone we know." "Then who?" Lily whispered. Ethan typed a random name, Margaret Hale. It had come from nowhere, yet it felt right. The app buzzed softly. A low-frequency hum rolled through the laptop's speakers. The sound was strange, not mechanical, but not fully human either. almost like a voice learning how to form itself. The lights on the router flickered. The digital recorder in Lily's hand hissed with static. The house seemed to lean closer. The fire-damaged fireplace groaned. A plank shifted somewhere upstairs, and with every second the air thickened, as though invisible smoke was filling the room. Then, on the laptop screen, words appeared. Open quote, "Who is calling me?" Close quote. Clara's breath caught. It wasn't just text. The words were accompanied by a faint whisper from the speakers. A woman's voice, raspy, layered, as though two voices were speaking at once. They froze. None of them spoke. Outside, the wind howled through the empty street, rattling the window panes like skeletal fingers. For a moment, Marcus laughed nervously, trying to cut the tension. It's just pattern matching, predictive text, nothing real. But Clara's eyes stayed locked on the screen, her lips pale. She whispered back, almost involuntarily, "We are here. Can you hear us?" The cursor blinked. The room went silent except for the rain and the hum of the machine. And then the words scrolled across. Open quote, "Yes, I hear you. But I am not Margaret." Close quote. The screen flickered, casting the entire room in erratic shadows. Something upstairs moved, slowly, deliberately. The words on the screen hung in the air like a blade suspended by a thread. "Yes, I hear you, but I am not Margaret." The sentence glowed faintly on Ethan's laptop, its white letters buzzing against the black void. The four friends stared in silence, the rain hammering the windows as if demanding entry. The steady drip in the corner of the room felt louder, like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Ethan broke the silence first. His voice was calm, almost too calm, but beneath the surface lay a current of fascination. Ethan was the reason they were here. Tall, wiry, and sharp-eyed, he had always been the one to push boundaries. A coder with an obsession for systems that blurred the line between human and machine, he saw this seance not as a ghost story, but as data waiting to be parsed. To him, the thrill wasn't fear, it was discovery. The way his eyes gleamed as he stared at the screen, one could almost believe he wanted the thing on the other side to be real. "This is exactly what I told you," Ethan whispered. "The algorithm doesn't just generate words, it's pulling from something else, a data set we don't control." Marcus groaned, leaning back on the broken sofa that creaked under his weight. He was the opposite of Ethan, sturdy, practical, perpetually skeptical. The kind of person who needed proof, who demanded logic even when logic failed. With his arms crossed tightly across his chest, he muttered, "Or it's just a clever trick. Some prank software written to screw with gullible people. Come on, Ethan, you don't really think." But he didn't finish the sentence. His voice faltered when he looked back at the screen. His rationality was intact, but his body betrayed him. His legs shook restlessly, his breath shortened, and sweat glistened along his temple despite the December cold. Lily sat on the floor beside the camping table, her recorder clutched tightly in her hands. The youngest of the group, with delicate features and a nervous smile that rarely lasted long, she had joined the seance less out of curiosity and more out of loyalty. She believed in Ethan, maybe too much, and though her skepticism was real, her fear was stronger. She pressed the recorder's button, the red light blinking in rhythm with her pulse. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. The question wasn't really for Ethan. It was for Clara. Clara hadn't moved since the words appeared. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, her hands folded tightly in her lap as if she were holding herself together. Clara was the quiet one, the one who rarely spoke unless necessary. But when she did, people listened. There was gravity in her presence, something unspoken. Perhaps it was the grief she carried. The loss of her brother Daniel had carved a permanent hollow in her. She had agreed to this seance under one condition. No one would use his name. Yet, when the screen denied being Margaret, she had felt something shift deep inside her. She leaned forward, her breath shaky but her voice steady. "Then, who are you?" The cursor blinked. Long seconds passed. The wind howled through the broken shutters, and the rain pounded harder, as if drowning out the answer. Finally, the screen flickered, and the response appeared, open quote, "I am the one who answers. I am what you invited." Close quote. Lily gasped and pulled back. Marcus cursed under his breath. Ethan, however, leaned closer, as if trying to absorb the very pixels. "This is incredible," Ethan muttered. "It's context-aware, not just predictive, it's reactive." Clara turned her head slowly toward him, her eyes sharp. "Does it sound like a program to you?" The silence that followed was heavy. Even Ethan couldn't answer. The group sat there, each of them caught in their own inner storm. The seance wasn't just about the app anymore. It had become a mirror, reflecting the things they brought with them into this crumbling house. Ethan, chasing his hunger for proof of something beyond code. Marcus, clinging to reason even as it slipped through his fingers. Lily, trembling with the desire to believe, but terrified of what belief might cost. And Clara, who feared most of all that the thing speaking to them wasn't a stranger. The laptop chimed softly. A new line appeared. Open quote, "4 voices in the dark. One carries grief, one carries doubt, one carries faith, one carries hunger." Close quote. The words didn't look generated. They looked personal. Marcus sat upright, his jaw tightening. No way. There's no way the program knows that. It can't. But Clara whispered, almost to herself, "It knows." The rain outside lashed harder, lightning flickering somewhere beyond the horizon, illuminating the skeletal branches of trees that leaned against the house like eavesdroppers. For a fleeting second, the shadows in the room seemed to move, bending not with the light, but against it. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard again. His hunger had only deepened. "What do you want from us?" he typed. The reply came instantly, as though it had been waiting. Open quote, "To be heard, to be seen, to come closer." Close quote. The laptop screen dimmed, the text dissolving into static. For a moment, the only light was the blinking red dot on Lily's recorder. It cast a faint glow on her terrified face. Somewhere upstairs, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps began to echo. Clara's hands tightened. Ethan's breath quickened. Marcus stood as if ready to bolt. Lily whispered into the darkness, her voice trembling. "It's not just the app." And the house answered with silence, deeper than before, as though it had been waiting for them all along. The footsteps overhead stopped as suddenly as they had begun. The silence that followed pressed against the walls of the room like a suffocating weight. The 4 friends froze, their eyes darting toward the ceiling as if expecting it to collapse. Then, with a faint crackle, the laptop screen flickered back to life. The static bled away into words. Open quote. "Do you want to know my name?" Close quote. Ethan's heart hammered, but his fingers moved with mechanical certainty across the keyboard. Yes. For several long seconds, the cursor blinked, waiting. Then the reply formed slowly, letter by letter, like something being dragged from a pit. Open quote, "I was Eleanor Whitford." Close quote. Clara stiffened. The name wasn't familiar, but the way it appeared, deliberate, intentional, sent chills down her spine. Lily quickly checked the recorder to make sure it was still capturing everything. Marcus leaned forward, his skepticism wavering, his practical mind scrambling for explanations. "Eleanor Whitford," he repeated under his breath. "Who the hell is that?" The screen answered. Open quote. "You won't find me in your books. Not anymore." Close quote. A flash of lightning burst through the cracked shutters, illuminating the peeling wallpaper, the mold-streaked ceiling, the shadows that seemed to breathe along the corners of the room. And then, the words kept coming, unprompted, as if the entity had been waiting decades to speak. Open quote. "I was born in this town, 1897. My family owned the house where you sit now. My father was strict, my mother quiet, my brothers cruel. I grew up with whispers in the halls, secrets I was never meant to hear. And then one winter, I vanished." Close quotes exchanged glances. Marcus rubbed his temples, muttering, "It's just pulling random text. Old newspaper archives, internet scraps." but even he sounded unconvinced. The screen pulsed again. Open quote, I was taken to the cellar by my brothers. They said it was a game, hide and seek, but the door never opened again. Close quote. Lily gasped, clapping her hand over her mouth. Clara's chest tightened as if the story resonated in some unspoken place within her. Ethan's fingers twitched above the keyboard, but for once, he didn't type. The words were flowing without him. Open quote, I screamed until my voice broke. The cold ate me. The dark drank me. No one came. I died with the sound of footsteps above me, knowing they would never return. Close quote. A sharp chill swept through the room, far colder than the winter storm outside. The air itself seemed to thicken, carrying with it the faint smell of damp earth and rotting wood. Marcus pushed himself off the sofa, pacing. No, this is too specific. Someone must have programmed this story in. A sick urban legend, that's all. But Clara's voice cut through the room like a blade. Urban legends don't answer questions in real time. The screen flickered again, more violently this time. Open quote, they buried me in silence. No grave, no stone, no prayers. The house forgot me. The world forgot me. But the dark remembered. The dark keeps what is abandoned. Close quote. The words seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Each letter etched itself into the friends' minds, a voice they didn't hear with their ears, but with something deeper, older. Lily's eyes welled with tears. She just wanted someone to listen. But the next line shattered any illusion of innocence. Open quote, I do not want pity, I want presence. Every soul that steps into this house belongs to me. And now you have called me by name. Close quote. The shadows in the corners thickened, writhing like smoke yet never dispersing. A dull thud echoed from beneath the floorboards, as though something shifted in the buried cellar. Clara's voice trembled. Why us? Why now? The reply came swiftly, cruelly. Open quote, because you opened the door. You built a bridge. The machine is your seance. The wire's your circle of salt. And I walked across. Close quote. The realization hit them all at once. The app wasn't creating ghosts, it was summoning them. It was a beacon, a signal cast into the abyss, and the abyss had answered. Marcus sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair, muttering, Jesus Christ, this is insane, we shouldn't have. But Ethan leaned closer, captivated. His fascination overrode his fear. So you've been here trapped for over a century? Alone? The cursor blinked. Open quote, not alone, never alone. There are others in the dark, but I am the one who listens, the one who remembers, the one who hungers. Close quote. The final word hung on the screen like a brand, its edges blurring as if the letters themselves couldn't hold it. Hunger. The friends sat in silence, each trying to process the weight of what they had unleashed. Clara could feel her brother's absence pressing against her heart, twisting into something darker. Lily whispered prayers under her breath. Marcus stared at the floor, his rational world cracking like glass under pressure. Ethan's eyes gleamed, not with courage, but with obsession. Then, the laptop dimmed once more. The rain outside faltered for a brief, unnatural second, and in that hollow pause, a sound rose from the floor beneath them. Knocking, slow, deliberate, coming from the cellar. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. Clara's skin crawled. She knew, without needing to ask, that Eleanor Whitford was no longer just a story on the screen. She was here. The knocking didn't stop. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. The rhythm carried through the wooden beams of the floor, resonating inside their rib cages like a second heartbeat. Clara grabbed Ethan's wrist. Don't answer it. But the laptop already had. The screen flickered and spat out words in jagged bursts, as though typed by invisible hands hammering the keys from below. Open quote, you hear me now. You feel me. The cellar door is opening. Close quote, a loud creak groaned through the house. They all turned toward the far end of the hallway where the cellar entrance lay. The door shuddered once, as though nudged from the inside. Marcus cursed under his breath. This is bullshit. Some prank. Some lunatic hacked this app. His voice was sharp, but his steps slowed as he edged toward the hallway, eyes wide and unblinking. The atmosphere thickened. The smell of damp earth grew stronger, clawing at their throats. The faint buzzing of the ceiling light turned erratic, flickering in nervous spasms. Shadows lengthened across the peeling wallpaper, writhing as if the very walls recoiled. Lily clutched her cross necklace so tightly, the edges dug into her palm. This isn't normal. We need to leave. But Ethan shook his head, enthralled. No, this is it. We wanted proof, and now we have it. She's real. His voice trembled with awe, not fear. The laptop glowed brighter, the text appearing in rapid succession. Open quote, "Leave. You invited me. You begged the dark to speak. Do you think the dark lets you walk away?" Close quote. The last word, away, stretched across the screen, repeating again and again until it filled the display like a suffocating mantra. Marcus snapped the laptop shut. The room plunged into silence. For a single, desperate moment, they thought it might be over. Then came the whisper, not through speakers, not from the laptop. It came from the air itself. A woman's voice, breathless and broken, as if carried through soil. Open quote, "Clara," close quote. Clara's blood froze. Her name. It had spoken her name. She stumbled back, shaking her head violently. No, that's not. The voice came again, louder this time, crawling into every corner of the room. Open quote, "Clara, come home," close quote. She clutched her ears, but the voice was inside her, vibrating through bone. Ethan reached for her, but Clara pushed him away. Her brother's death, her grief was being twisted, weaponized. Meanwhile, Marcus noticed something on the wall. The wallpaper, yellowed with mold, was peeling in long strips. Beneath it, faint etchings emerged, scratches, words gouged into the plaster itself. He leaned closer, squinting in the flickering light. Names, dozens of names, each carved with frantic, desperate strokes. His own name was there. Ethan's, Lily's, Clara's, all written as though waiting, as though the walls had been expecting them. Marcus staggered back, bile rising in his throat. Oh my God, she already knows us. The air snapped cold. Their breath clouded in front of them. Then, all at once, the lights extinguished. Darkness swallowed the room whole. Lily screamed, I can't see! I can't see!" In the blackness, movement stirred. Footsteps, light, bare, deliberate, circled them. Each step landed on rotting boards, each creak sinking deeper into their bones. Ethan fumbled for his phone, its weak flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the dark. The light fell across the hallway. The cellar door was wide open. A wet draft drifted from the stairwell, carrying the stench of soil long undisturbed. At the threshold, something shifted. Not a figure, not quite, just a deeper darkness, clinging to the edges of the frame like a shadow that refused to break. Then the door slammed shut with a thunderous crack. The friends jumped, hearts slamming against their chests. The laptop sprang open on its own, its screen bursting to life. Words scrawled furiously. Open quote, "You called me? You stay." Close quote, Clara sobbed, her voice cracking. "Please, we didn't know." The reply came instantly. Open quote, "Ignorance does not free you. Every soul that speaks my name belongs to me." Close quote. The whispering swelled, multiplying, until the room quivered with overlapping voices. Some were women, some men, some children. A chorus of the lost, all clawing for release yet bound in endless echoes. Lily dropped to her knees, reciting prayers in broken gasps. Ethan, pale and trembling, still couldn't look away. His obsession had become a trap, binding him tighter with every word. The first true sign came then. Undeniable, physical. The furniture moved. The old wooden chair against the wall scraped violently across the floor, carving deep grooves into the wood. The coffee table lurched forward as if shoved by unseen hands. The sofa they sat on tilted, sending them tumbling onto the floor with startled cries. Marcus scrambled to his feet, backing toward the door. He grabbed the handle and yanked. It didn't budge. He pulled harder, slamming his shoulder against it. Nothing. The house itself had become a prison. The voices fell silent. For one unbearable second, there was only the pounding of their hearts. And then, typing. The The laptop clattered as invisible hands struck the keys. They all turned to watch, paralyzed, as new words etched themselves on the glowing screen. Open quote. First I whispered, then I knocked. Now I enter. Close quote. The screen bled black as though ink spilled across it. The letters dissolved into writhing shapes, stretching like skeletal fingers. And in that moment, Clara felt something icy brush against her arm. A touch, unmistakably human, but colder than the grave. She screamed. The first signs were no longer whispers, no longer tricks of the light. Eleanor Whitford was here, and she wanted more. Marcus slammed the door handle again, his shoulder aching from the impact. It refused to move, as though welded shut by unseen hands. He swore violently, then turned back toward the others, chest heaving. This house, it's just a trick, he muttered, though his voice betrayed the lie. Someone's messing with us. It has to be. But no one answered him. Clara was curled up against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking back and forth. Her lips moved silently, mouthing words only she could hear. Ethan hovered over her, whispering her name, begging her to snap out of it. Lily still knelt in prayer, her eyes squeezed shut, clutching the cross until her knuckles blanched white. The silence felt worse than the voices. Marcus dragged a hand over his face. He had always prided himself on being the skeptic, the rational one. But how could he explain the names etched into the wall? The door slamming on its own? The icy touch Clara swore she felt? His mind scrambled for answers. Hidden projectors, speakers in the walls. Some twisted hacker rigged this whole house to scare us. But the look in Clara's eyes, that was not fear born of cheap theatrics. That was the kind of terror that hollowed you out from the inside. Listen to me, he said, forcing authority into his tone. We're freaking ourselves out. That's all. Sleep deprivation, stress. Clara's grieving. Ethan's feeding into it. Lily's panicking. And I. He stopped, realizing his own voice was shaking. I just need air. He stalked to the window, yanked at the curtains, and froze. The glass reflected his own face, pale and damp with sweat. But behind his reflection, another figure loomed. A woman. Her face pale as bone, eyes drowned in shadow, lips curled in a smile that was not human. Marcus staggered back with a strangled cry. The reflection vanished. Only his own terrified expression stared back at him. The others rushed to him, alarmed. Ethan gripped his arm. What? What did you see? Marcus shook his head violently. Nothing. Nothing. It was nothing. His denial sounded hollow even to himself. Clara's voice cut through the room, ragged and raw. She's not gonna stop. Don't you get it? We opened the door. She's here now. No, Marcus snapped. You're hearing things, seeing things. We all are. That app, it got into our heads. It's psychological. That's all this is. But even as he said it, the words felt brittle, fragile, like glass about to shatter. Lily finally opened her eyes, her face blotchy with tears. Marcus, when I prayed, something prayed back. The group stared at her in horrified silence. I said, "Deliver us from evil," she whispered, voice trembling, and it answered, "Amen." Ethan's stomach lurched. For the first time, even his obsession with the seance wavered. He looked to Marcus for reassurance, but found none. The house groaned around them, old wood bending and creaking as though under invisible weight. Somewhere above, footsteps padded across the attic floor, slow, deliberate, back and forth. See? Marcus said desperately. It's animals, rats, squirrels, houses make noises. But no animal walked with such intent. Clara lifted her head, eyes bloodshot and wild. You keep lying to yourself. You heard her. You all heard her. She said my name. Marcus opened his mouth to retort, but the words withered. She was right. They had all heard it. For the first time in his life, Marcus doubted not just the world around him, but himself. His reason, his shield, was crumbling. Maybe he was losing his mind. Maybe they all were. The laptop chimed suddenly. They hadn't touched it, hadn't even dared to look at it since the last message. But the screen glowed once more, the cursor blinking in anticipation. Marcus approached slowly, dread clawing up his spine. The text appeared one letter at a time. Open quote, doubt divides. Fear feeds. I am stronger now. Close quote. The cursor blinked. Then another line appeared. Open quote. Choose who to trust. Only one leaves. Close quote. The group recoiled. Lily let out a sob. Ethan shook his head furiously. No, we're not playing this. It's just text, that's all. Some hacker screwing with us. But his voice cracked at the edges. Even he didn't believe his own words anymore. The atmosphere thickened, pressing on their lungs. The air itself seemed to pulse, alive, watching. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind through the cracks felt deliberate, purposeful. Marcus sat down hard on the floor, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, he couldn't tell if he was awake or dreaming. Couldn't tell if the things he saw were real or the inventions of a crumbling mind. Clara crawled closer to him, her voice low and urgent. You feel it too, don't you? She's inside already. She's inside us. He looked up at her, searching her expression. Was she right? Or was this mass hysteria spiraling out of control? The worst part was that he no longer knew. That was Eleanor's true power, not just haunting the house, but rotting the certainty out of their minds. By the time the first light of dawn threatened to creep over the horizon, none of them trusted their own senses anymore. And the night was far from over. The clock struck 3 a.m. That cursed hour stretched out like a knife, slicing the night into pieces too sharp to hold. The house seemed to know it, every beam, every nail humming with a dread that seeped into their bones. The group had gathered in the living room, though gathered was the wrong word. They clung to opposite corners, like castaways marooned on separate islands, their eyes darting at every sound. The air smelled of wet plaster and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. Marcus paced the floorboards restlessly, trying to banish the heaviness pressing on his chest. Clara refused to look up from the floor. Ethan sat on the couch with his hands gripping his knees, knuckles trembling from tension. Lily had fallen silent, her cross still clutched in her hands, but her lips no longer moved. It was as though even her prayers had been swallowed. Then came the first crash. The bookshelf near the window tipped forward violently, spilling its contents across the room. Old books thundered to the floor, pages tearing, the sound ricocheting through the silence. Everyone jumped. It's old wood, Marcus said instantly, though his voice shook. Rotten nails, that's all. But no one believed him anymore. A single book slid across the floor, away from the pile. Slowly, deliberately. It stopped in front of Clara's feet. The cover was faded, but her name was scrawled across it in black marker. Clara. Her breath hitched. I didn't. She backed against the wall, eyes wide with terror. Before anyone could speak, the lights flickered. The bulbs buzzed angrily, sputtering in and out before plunging the house into darkness. The only illumination came from the laptop, still glowing faintly on the table, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Then the voice came. At first, it was soft, almost a whisper. A woman's voice, rich and hollow, curling through the air like smoke. Marcus, he froze. Marcus, why do you deny me? The words seemed to slither inside his ears, bypassing thought, piercing straight into his mind. He staggered back, slamming against the wall. Who said that? His shout was wild, broken. The others stared at him with horror. We didn't, Ethan whispered. The voice laughed then, a low, cold sound that spread through the house like frost. Marcus felt it crawling across his skin, icy fingers dragging down his spine. He wanted to run, but his legs betrayed him, rooted in place. Another crash echoed upstairs. Heavy footsteps pounded the floor above them, slow and deliberate. One step. Pause. Another. Clara whimpered. She's coming down. The sound stopped, hovering in the silence. Then, from the staircase, a shadow slid across the wall, stretching unnaturally long. Lily clutched her cross tighter, finally finding her voice. Leave us alone, she screamed, her words cracking with desperation. But her plea was answered by a sudden gust of wind that slammed the living room door shut. The windows rattled violently, the curtains whipping though no storm raged outside. The laptop chimed. Words appeared again, sharp and final. Open quote, you asked, Now I am here. Close quote. Ethan stumbled forward, grabbing the device. Stop this! You're not real. His voice broke, betraying the tremor in his hands. The cursor blinked. Then the reply came. Open quote. Then why are you afraid? Close quote. Ethan hurled the laptop against the wall. It shattered, sparks hissing into the darkness. For a heartbeat, silence returned. Then every bulb in the house burst at once. Glass rained from the ceiling, shards glittering faintly in the dim light of the storm outside. Clara screamed, covering her face. Marcus shielded Lily instinctively. Ethan stood frozen, chest heaving. The house was plunged into complete darkness. Only the storm's lightning illuminated the room, strobing flashes that turned the world into a nightmare slideshow. With each burst of white light, the group saw her. A figure at the edge of the room, a woman with no eyes. Her mouth stretched too wide, her body bending at impossible angles. Flash, she was closer. Flash, closer still. Flash, right behind Clara. Clara shrieked, stumbling forward. Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the center of the room. Marcus's chest burned. We have to get out, he shouted, though he knew the door would not open. Still, panic propelled him toward it. The handle turned beneath his grip this time. For a flicker of hope, he thought they might escape. But when he yanked the door open, only blackness gaped beyond. Not the porch, not the street, just endless void, swallowing sound and light alike. He slammed it shut, gasping. There's nothing out there, he whispered hoarsely. The others stared, horror sinking deeper. They were trapped, not in a house, but in something else. Something that wore the house like skin. A shrill ringing cut through the air. The broken laptop lay in pieces on the floor, yet the sound came from its ruins. The cracked screen flickered back to life, glowing with words that seared into their eyes. Open quote. No escape. Close quote. Marcus backed away, clutching his head, his rationality, his skepticism. Everything he had built his life on was crumbling to dust. He no longer doubted the haunting. He no longer doubted her. He only doubted whether they would survive the night. The house moaned again, louder, like the groan of something ancient waking from its slumber. The air grew heavier, each breath shallow and painful. Shadows twisted across the walls, moving against the light, writhing like living things. Clara clutched Ethan's arm. She doesn't want us to leave, she whispered. Her voice cracked into a sob. She wants us to stay forever. The footsteps resumed, this time on the stairs. Descending. One by one. Closer, closer. The group huddled together in the center of the room, waiting, breathless. When the final step creaked, the house went silent. They were no longer alone. The silence was worse than the noise. For a moment, none of them breathed. The air itself felt frozen, too thick to pull into their lungs. The house seemed to lean in closer, listening, waiting. Then came the scrape, a slow, dragging sound across the floorboards above them. Nails or claws. Each stroke was deliberate, scratching deep into the wood as though carving something unseen. Lightning flashed through the windows, and in that fleeting strobe of white, they saw her, standing at the base of the stairs now. The woman was no longer just a shadow. Her skin was the color of old parchment, stretched too tight across her bones. Her hair hung in wet, black tangles, dripping onto the floor though no rain had touched her. Where her eyes should have been, there were only pits of darkness, deep and endless. And her smile, her grotesque, tearing smile, spanned too wide, splitting her cheeks until bloodless cracks reached her ears. She spoke without moving her lips. You wanted to talk to the dead. The words pressed into their skulls, vibrating their teeth. Now you will join them. The storm outside seemed to answer her proclamation. Thunder cracked like the world itself was breaking. Marcus stepped forward before his courage could collapse. His voice trembled, but he forced it out. We didn't mean this. We didn't call for you. Leave us. Her head tilted at a wrong angle, snapping like brittle wood. But you did. You opened the door, and I came. The house shook violently, bookshelves rattling, glass splintering. One picture frame fell from the wall, shattering at Clara's feet. When she looked down, her blood ran cold. The photograph inside wasn't of the house, it was of them. The four of them, huddled exactly as they were now. Except in the photo, a fifth figure stood among them. A pale woman with a smile that stretched far too wide. Clara screamed, dropping the frame. The figure in the photo seemed to twitch. The entity moved then, no longer lingering. She surged forward, her body jerking in unnatural bursts like film skipping frames. In an instant, she was across the room. Lily cried out, holding her cross high. In the name of God. But before she could finish, the cross melted in her grip, metal hissing as though plunged into fire. It seared her palm, and she screamed, dropping it. The woman's laugh split the air, high, sharp, unbearable. The lights flickered back on, but they gave no relief. Instead, they revealed horror. Every wall now lined with faces. Dozens, hundreds, pressed into the plaster, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams. The wallpaper pulsed like skin, as if the house itself breathed with the trapped souls. Marcus staggered back, bile rising in his throat. Oh God, they're real. They're all. The woman lunged at him. Her hands were ice as they wrapped around his throat, squeezing with inhuman strength. Marcus clawed desperately, his vision spotting black. He felt the cold burrow into his chest, hollowing him out. Ethan acted without thinking. He grabbed the broken laptop from the floor and swung it with all his strength. The shards of metal and glass struck her head, snapping it sideways with a sickening crack. She released Marcus, who collapsed to the floor, gasping, clawing at the air like a drowning man. But the relief was short-lived. The woman straightened, her neck bending back into place with a grotesque snap. Her eyeless sockets turned toward Ethan. "Brave," she hissed, but pointless. She opened her mouth wider and wider until her jaw split impossibly low, stretching her face into a cavernous maw. From it poured a sound that was not a scream, not a growl, but something both, an inhuman wail that made the windows shatter inward. The group collapsed, clutching their ears as blood trickled from their noses. The floorboards buckled. Shadows rose from the cracks like smoke, writhing and coiling around them. Each shadow had a face, a familiar face, mouths whispering, crying, begging. Clara recognized one, her grandmother's face, long dead, eyes wide with sorrow. "Clara," the shadow moaned, her chest seized. No, you're not real." She sobbed, covering her ears, but the shadow hands reached anyway, grasping at her legs, pulling her down. Ethan and Marcus grabbed her arms, hauling her upward, fighting the pull. The shadows hissed angrily, retreating only when the woman raised her hand. She didn't need to touch them again. Her power was the house itself, the storm itself, the darkness itself. The ceiling groaned. Cracks split through it like veins. Dust rained down, choking them as the house threatened to collapse. "Run!" Marcus shouted hoarsely, his throat raw. But there was nowhere to run. Every door led only to void. Every window showed only black. The house was no longer in their world. It was her world now. The woman floated above the floor, rising slowly, her arms outstretched as if welcoming them. "You are mine," she intoned. "You called, and I answered. Now you belong here." Ethan, tears streaking his face, screamed back at her. "We didn't want this. We just wanted to play a stupid game." Her grin widened, splitting until her face tore. All games have a cost. Then she descended. Her hands reached for them, shadows binding their wrists, dragging them upward toward her yawning mouth, that black abyss promising nothing but silence and cold. The storm's roar drowned their screams. The roar of the storm became deafening, shaking the very bones of the house. Shadows lashed across the room like living whips, binding wrists, coiling around ankles, dragging the four friends toward the thing that had emerged from their séance. The woman's form loomed above them, her smile splitting wider, jagged cracks running up her cheeks. That endless mouth yawned open, and they could feel the pull of it, not just air, but something deeper. It was as though her very presence was drawing out their souls. Clara felt her chest tighten, her heartbeat weakening, her strength bleeding away as if gravity itself was abandoning her. 1,000 whispers echoed in her ears, voices of the trapped, pleading for release, warning her of what awaited. "Don't look," Marcus croaked, dragging his gaze away from the black abyss of her mouth. "Don't let her pull you in." But Ethan's eyes were locked. His face slackened, his lips parting as though he were ready to speak to her, to answer. Clara slapped him, hard. His head snapped sideways, and his eyes cleared for a moment. The entity shrieked, a piercing sound like glass shredding in their ears. Lily dropped to her knees, hands clasped together, muttering prayers through her tears. Her words faltered as the shadows tightened, cutting into her skin, but she refused to stop. The cross she had dropped earlier lay broken and blackened at her feet, but still she prayed, and something changed. The whispers around them grew louder, no longer just pleading. They were answering her. Voices rose, dissonant, desperate, yet joining her prayer. The walls themselves seemed to tremble, as if the countless trapped souls pressed forward, finding strength in her words. The woman hissed, jerking back as if struck. Smoke-like shadows peeled off her form, writhing away in pain. Marcus's eyes widened. She's not invincible. She's feeding on them, on us, if they fight back. The entity snarled, shadows whipping toward Lily. One struck her across the face, knocking her flat. She screamed as blood welled at her temple. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing a jagged shard of the broken laptop screen. His hand shook violently, but he plunged it into the writhing shadow nearest him. To his shock, it screamed, not with the woman's voice, but with the voice of a man, desperate, terrified. The shadow burst like smoke, dissolving. The woman shrieked again, her eyeless sockets snapping toward him. "You dare!" "Shut up!" Ethan bellowed, stabbing again and again into the dark tendrils, each strike scattering another tortured face. His arms burned, but rage carried him forward. Marcus joined in, kicking over a candle from the seance. Fire spread across the floor, and where the shadows touched it, they recoiled violently. "She hates the light!" Marcus yelled. "Get the candles now!" Clara scrambled, snatching up the others and relighting them with shaking hands. The moment their flames caught, the air vibrated. The shadows screamed in unison, retreating to the edges of the walls. The woman twisted, her body cracking in impossible angles. Her grin faltered, splitting downward, revealing rows of teeth that churned like grinding stone. "Fools," she whispered, her voice deeper, darker now. "You think you can drive me away? This house is mine. It always will be." Her hands shot forward, and with a violent pull, the floorboards ripped upward. From beneath, countless arms, gray, skeletal, half-formed, reached out, clawing at their legs, dragging them toward the gaping cracks. Clara shrieked as icy hands gripped her calves, pulling her downward. She thrashed wildly, but the grip was relentless. Marcus dove, grabbing her arms, pulling back with all his strength. "Don't let go," he shouted, veins bulging in his neck as he fought against the unseen weight. Ethan joined him, their combined strength just barely keeping her from vanishing into the writhing pit. Lily, still bleeding, crawled forward and pressed her shaking hands over Clara's legs, whispering prayers with renewed desperation. The arms recoiled slightly, enough for Clara to scramble free. The woman screamed, her body unraveling into tendrils of smoke and bone, reforming, shifting between faces. She was dozens of people at once, hundreds, the stolen forms of those who had died here. Their mouths all moved in unison. "We are many. We are forever. You cannot stop us." Clara's eyes locked on the Ouija board still lying in the circle, its letters glowing faintly red in the candlelight. Realization struck her like lightning. "The board," she shouted. "It's the doorway. We opened it with that. We can close it with that." Marcus blinked. "Are you insane? We don't even know how." "Then we figure it out," she snapped, scrambling to the board. Her hands shook as she placed them on the planchette. "Help me!" One by one, the others joined her. Marcus, Ethan, and finally Lily pressed trembling fingers against the piece. Together they slid it across the board. The entity shrieked instantly, recoiling. "No! Stop!" The candles flared higher, flames bending toward the board as though feeding its power. The planchette moved faster than their hands could follow, spelling words none of them understood. Ancient, broken phrases burned into the wood itself, glowing. The ground heaved violently. Pictures fell, walls cracked, the house groaned like a wounded beast. The woman thrashed, slamming against invisible walls, her form destabilizing. "You cannot undo me! You called me! You belong here!" Clara screamed over the chaos. "We never belonged to you!" The planchette stopped abruptly on a single word. Goodbye. Every candle erupted at once. The shadows shrieked in agony, ripped backward into the walls, into the cracks, into the screaming woman herself. Her face split into countless fragments, dozens of mouths shrieking in unison as she was pulled toward the board. The planchette spun wildly, dragging her piece by piece into its small wooden circle. Her long fingers clawed at the floor, splintering wood, leaving gouges as she was sucked in. "No, not again, not!" Her voice cut off. The board cracked in half. Silence fell. The storm outside stopped as if cut by a blade. The house went still. Only the ragged breathing of the four friends filled the air. For a long time, none of them moved. The only light came from the last candle, its flame trembling but alive. Clara finally whispered, "It's over. It has to be over." But Marcus shook his head slowly, staring at the broken Ouija board. "We didn't destroy it. We only sent her back." His voice cracked. "And doors can always open again." The silence of the house pressed in around them, heavy and watchful. And in the corner, just beyond the reach of the candlelight, something shifted. For a long moment after the board split in two, none of them moved. Their bodies shook, lungs heaving, hearts still racing as if expecting another strike. The candlelight flickered against pale, sweat-soaked faces. The silence pressed down, so absolute it felt unnatural. No storm, no wind, no sound beyond their own breath. Clara sat back hard against the wall, the broken halves of the Ouija board lying inches away. Her fingers throbbed with pain, blood oozing from shallow cuts where splinters had pierced her skin. She couldn't take her eyes off the charred letters still faintly glowing on the wood. Goodbye. It should have been a comfort, but instead it felt like a warning. Marcus wiped his face with trembling hands. He was pale, lips cracked, eyes wide with disbelief. We did it," he said at last, though his voice lacked conviction. He kept staring at the board as if expecting it to reassemble itself. "She's gone." "No." Lily's whisper cut through the heavy air. She pressed a blood-soaked cloth against her temple, still shaking violently. "Not gone. Trapped? There's a difference." No one argued with her. The house creaked, wood settling. The sound made all of them flinch, as if expecting another eruption of claws and teeth. When nothing came, Ethan forced himself to stand. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else, wobbling beneath him. "We need to leave," he said. His voice was hoarse, scraped raw from screaming. "Now, before anything changes its mind." They gathered their things in a frantic silence. The laptop, once glowing with her face, now lay dark and shattered, the screen smeared with streaks of soot. None of them dared touch it. Clara shoved her phone into her bag with shaking hands, though part of her wanted to throw it into the fire. The thought that this thing could reach them through any device was unbearable. As they staggered into the hallway, the house seemed heavier, darker, every shadow a potential threat. The wallpaper peeled in strips like rotting flesh, and the air carried a sour tang of smoke and earth. Each step down the stairs groaned under their weight, and every sound sent icy shivers down their spines. At the door, Marcus hesitated. He glanced back at the séance room, where faint curls of smoke still rose from the scorched floorboards. His jaw clenched. "If someone else comes here," he muttered. "No one will," Clara interrupted, her voice sharp with exhaustion. "No one should." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but instead, he gave a short nod. Together, they pushed open the door. Cold night air rushed in, biting their skin, filling their lungs with a sharp relief. For the first time, Clara realized how suffocating the inside of the house had been. Even the rain, now only a light drizzle, felt like a blessing. They stumbled into the street, soaked to the bone, but alive. Behind them, the house loomed, a dark silhouette against the bruised sky. Its windows reflected nothing, black holes staring outward like watching eyes. None of them spoke as they walked. Their footsteps splashed through shallow puddles, the silence between them heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Ethan broke it. "We're not telling anyone." Lily glanced at him, her face pale, hollow. "We have to. People need to know." He shook his head violently. "And say what? That we summoned a ghost through an app? That it tried to eat our souls? No one will believe us. They'll think we're insane." "He's right," Marcus said quietly. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, shoulders hunched against the chill. Even if they believed, what could they do? It's better left alone. Clara wanted to argue, to scream that silence was what had allowed this place to fester, to trap all those souls. But her voice caught in her throat. Because deep down, she knew. Some doors, once acknowledged, opened wider. They walked until the streetlights grew brighter and the houses more familiar, until the cursed building was only a shadow behind them. Not once did they look back. When they finally parted ways, it was without hugs or promises, just a wordless agreement. They had survived, but survival had changed them. That night, Clara lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the house, every shift of wind outside made her heart stutter. She kept her phone on the nightstand, screen dark, but she couldn't shake the dread that it might light up with that familiar face again. She turned it off, and yet, in the silence of her room, she thought she heard whispers. Marcus poured whiskey into a glass with shaking hands, downing it in one swallow. He couldn't stop replaying the moment Clara had almost been dragged into the floor, the way those hands had clawed at her legs. He told himself the alcohol would help him sleep. It didn't, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw hers, the woman's face, splitting into 100 mouths. Lily sat at her desk, writing furiously in a journal. She needed to document everything before it blurred. The names, the sensations, the things the voices had whispered. She filled pages until her hand cramped. When she finally looked up, she swore she saw words scrawled across her window in condensation. Not finished. When she blinked, they were gone. Ethan tried to delete the app from his phone. He pressed the button again and again, but each time the icon refused to vanish. Panic surged through him. He threw the phone across the room, where it landed with a dull thud. The screen lit up on its own. "Good evening, Ethan." The four of them never met again. Not as a group. They avoided each other's calls, ignored the heavy silence of unspoken trauma. Some wounds were too raw to reopen. But each of them knew, deep down, that what they had done in that house wasn't an ending. It was an intermission. The board had cracked, but not shattered. The door had closed, but not locked. And somewhere in the endless digital void, the woman, no, the thing waited. Patience was its greatest weapon. It had waited decades in the house. It could wait again. And when the time came, when someone else reached across the veil with desperate hands and whispered words into an app they didn't understand, it would be there. Smiling, the town of Ashford moved on. It always did. The rain washed clean the streets, the power lines were repaired, and the neighbors forgot the blackout. Houses lit up again at night, and children played in the cracked sidewalks as though nothing had happened. But some things lingered. The house on Wellington Street remained dark, its curtains drawn tight. Weeks passed, yet no realtor's sign appeared. No lights flickered from inside. The neighbors whispered about hearing strange noises, about shadows in the windows at night, but none dared go closer. They called it haunted, cursed, doomed. No one noticed the faint glow that sometimes pulsed behind the upstairs window, like the soft, steady light of a computer screen. Clara tried to return to normal. She attended classes, forced smiles, pretended to laugh at jokes. But inside, she was brittle glass. Every time she heard a notification chime, her stomach lurched. She kept her phone off most days, but it didn't matter. The whispers weren't confined to devices anymore. One morning, she found her bathroom mirror fogged with words, though she hadn't showered. Just two, scrawled with a finger that wasn't hers. Still here. She smashed the mirror that day, but shards still reflected the faint outline of a woman's face that didn't belong to her. Marcus left town. He told no one where he was going, only that he needed space. He rented a cabin in Vermont, surrounded by pine trees and silence. For a while, he felt safe, but silence only made the memories louder. At night, his television turned on by itself, static hissing through the room. Sometimes, through the static, he swore he heard a laugh. And once, in the blue-white flicker, he saw her, standing in the corner, head tilted, smile too wide. He threw the TV out the next morning. But deep down, he knew it wasn't the television that brought her. It was him. Lily didn't run. She couldn't. Instead, she obsessed. Her journals multiplied, stacks of notebooks filled with frantic handwriting, sketches of faces she saw in dreams, diagrams of the séance. She scoured online forums for occultists, programmers, ghost hunters, anyone who might understand. One night, scrolling endlessly, she found a thread she had never seen before. The username was unfamiliar, the date stamp impossible. It claimed to be from next month. The post contained one sentence: "Don't answer when she calls your name." The username? Lily Ashford 93. Her own. Ethan tried denial. He forced himself into routines. Gym, work, endless hours of noise to drown out memory. He deleted the app, finally succeeding after dozens of tries. Relief surged through him like sunlight, until his new phone arrived. The first time he turned it on, the app was already there, pre-installed. He dropped it, heart pounding. When he picked it up again, the screen pulsed with familiar text. "Hello again, Ethan. Shall we continue?" The entity they had summoned was no longer bound to the house, no longer confined to wood and candles. It had tasted the network, the infinite threads of human connection. And like a virus, it spread. Not fast, not obvious, patiently. A glitch in someone's video call, a distorted voice in a live stream, an unfamiliar face tagged in group photos. Always there, just enough to unsettle, never enough to prove. Months later, a young couple bought the house on Wellington Street. They'd heard the rumors, of course, but laughed them off. Ghost stories added character, they said. They were modern, rational, armed with smart devices and bright optimism. The first night, they set up a new security system, complete with AI cameras. They wanted to feel safe. At 3:13 a.m., the cameras detected movement. The log showed two faces, but only two people lived there. Elsewhere, Clara dreamt of whispers, Marcus drank in silence, Lily scribbled warnings to herself, Ethan woke to notifications that weren't supposed to exist. They had broken the board. They had said goodbye. But the séance was never theirs to end, because the dead don't hang up, they wait. And somewhere, deep in the humming circuits of servers, in the unseen veins of code, a smile stretched wider, patient, endless, and ready for the next call. If your heart just trembled for a moment while hearing this story, leave your thoughts below. Who knows, maybe your experience was once the same. And if you want to keep walking with me into the next chilling nights, don't forget to hit subscribe. Be prepared, because the darkness has never slept. And next time, it just might call your name.